The gunshot cracked across the empty prairie like a judge's gavel, sharp, final, without room for appeal. Lena Cross didn't scream. She'd learned a long time ago that screaming only gave them satisfaction, and she'd be damned if she gave Marcus Trent one more piece of herself. The impact punched through her left shoulder blade, spinning her forward. Her boots caught on the uneven ground, and the world tilted sideways, sky trading places with dirt in a sickening rush. She was falling. Dust rose to meet her, and in that fractured second before impact, her mind cataloged everything she'd never do. Never see the ocean, never sleep without one eye open, never know what it felt like to wake up without that iron fist of fear clamped around her throat. Then she hit something solid. Not dirt. Something warm. Arms caught her mid-collapse, breaking her fall with a grunt of effort. The world stopped spinning. She blinked through the haze of shock and pain, trying to make sense of what just happened. A man's face came into focus above her, weathered, unshaven, eyes the color of storm clouds. He wasn't from the ranch. She'd never seen him before in her life. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and steady. "I got you." Lena's breath came in shallow gasps. The pain in her back spread like wildfire, hot and consuming. She tried to speak, but her tongue felt thick, useless. The stranger lowered her carefully to the ground, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he'd been carved from the same hard country that surrounded them. "Don't move," he told her, already shrugging out of his coat. "You're hit." No shit, she thought, but the words wouldn't come. Blood soaked through her shirt, warm and sticky. She could feel it pooling beneath her, seeping into the thirsty earth. The stranger pressed his coat against the wound, and the pressure sent a white-hot spike of agony through her chest. She did scream then, a short, bitten-off sound that she hated herself for. "I know," he said quietly. "I know it hurts." Another gunshot split the air, closer this time. The stranger's head snapped up, his whole body going still in a way that reminded Lena of a wolf catching a scent. His hand moved to the revolver at his hip, fingers curling around the grip with practiced ease. "How many?" he asked. Lena's vision swam. She fought to focus, to push words past the pain. "One," she managed. "Samuel, he's good." "How good?" "Good enough." The stranger's jaw tightened. He scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing against the late afternoon sun. The prairie stretched out in every direction, scrub brush and dust, nothing but open ground for half a mile. No cover. Nowhere to hide. "Can you ride?" he asked. Lena almost laughed. She couldn't even sit up without the world tilting sideways, but she nodded anyway. Lying here meant dying here, and she hadn't crawled through 2 days of hell just to bleed out in the dirt. The stranger didn't waste time on reassurances or gentle handling. He scooped her up in one smooth motion, coat and all, and started moving. Each step jarred her shoulder, sending fresh waves of pain radiating through her torso. She bit down on her lip hard enough to taste blood, determined not to slow him down with her weakness. His horse stood 20 yards away, a rangy bay gelding with intelligent eyes and dust on its flanks. The stranger practically threw her into the saddle, then swung up behind her in one fluid movement. His arm locked around her waist, pinning her against his chest. "Hold on," he said, and kicked the horse into a gallop. The world became a blur of motion and agony. Lena's head lolled against the stranger's shoulder, her body going limp as shock started to set in. She was dimly aware of the thundering hoofbeats, the stranger's heartbeat steady against her back, the way his arm tightened when she started to slip. Behind them, another shot rang out. The bullet whined past, close enough that Lena felt the displacement of air. The stranger didn't flinch, didn't slow. He leaned forward, urging the bay into an even faster pace, his body curved protectively around hers. "Stay with me," he said, his voice cutting through the fog in her head. "You hear me? Stay with me." Lena tried to answer, but darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision, soft and seductive. It would be so easy to let go, to sink into that welcoming oblivion. The pain would stop. The fear would stop. Everything would just stop. "No, you don't," the stranger growled, shaking her slightly. "Not yet. We're not done yet. We." As if they were in this together. As if he had any stake in whether she lived or died. The thought was absurd enough to anchor her, pulling her back from that seductive edge. She forced her eyes open, forced herself to focus on the rhythm of the horse's gait, the solid warmth of the man behind her. They rode hard for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The landscape began to change, prairie giving way to broken country, rocky outcrops and stubborn pines clinging to the hillsides. The stranger guided his horse into a narrow canyon, the walls rising steep on either side. The temperature dropped as the sun disappeared behind the ridgeline, and Lena started to shiver. "Almost there," the stranger said. Lena hadn't realized she'd spoken the question aloud until he answered. Her thoughts were getting slippery, hard to hold on to. She focused on breathing, in and out, in and out. Such a simple thing. Amazing how hard it could get. The canyon widened into a small valley, sheltered and hidden from the world outside. A cabin sat tucked against the far wall, rough-hewn logs and a stone chimney, small windows that looked out on the surrounding hills. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin and white against the darkening sky. The stranger reined in the horse and dismounted in one smooth motion, then reached up for Lena. His hands were careful despite his rough appearance, easing her down with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the gun on his hip and the hard set of his jaw. "Can you walk?" he asked. Lena's legs buckled the moment her feet touched ground. The stranger caught her without comment, scooping her up again like she weighed nothing. He carried her to the cabin, shouldering open the door and depositing her on a narrow bed in the corner. The interior was sparse but clean. A wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies. A bachelor's home, lived in but not loved. The stranger lit a lamp, filling the space with warm yellow light. "I'm going to need to see the wound," he said, already moving to the stove to heat water. "That bullet's still in there." Lena's stomach clenched. She'd known this was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The stranger worked efficiently, gathering supplies, a bottle of whiskey, clean cloth, a wicked-looking knife that he held in the lamp flame until the metal glowed. When he approached the bed, Lena caught his wrist. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice came out raspy, barely above a whisper, but she needed to know, needed something to hold on to besides the pain. He met her eyes, and for a moment something flickered in that storm cloud gaze. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of some kind. Then it was gone, shuttered behind that same hard exterior. "Caleb," he said. "Caleb Ridge." "Lena." She paused, then added, "Lena Cross." Caleb nodded once, like they'd just concluded a business transaction. "Pleased to meet you, Lena Cross. Now let go so I can keep you from dying in my bed." She released his wrist. Caleb helped her roll onto her stomach, then carefully cut away her shirt. The cool air hit her exposed skin, raising goosebumps. She heard him draw in a sharp breath. "Bad?" she asked. "I've seen worse." He poured whiskey over the wound, and Lena's whole body went rigid. But not by much. He gave her a leather strap to bite down on, then got to work. The knife bit deep, and Lena's scream was muffled by the leather clamped between her teeth. Pain exploded through her shoulder, white-hot, all-consuming. Her hands fisted in the blanket, nails tearing into the rough fabric. Caleb worked quickly, his hands steady despite the mess he was making. Lena felt the moment the blade found the bullet. A different kind of pain, sharper and more focused. Then pressure as he worked it free, and finally blessed relief as he dropped something small and metallic into a tin cup with a decisive clink. "Got it," he said. Lena spat out the leather strap, gasping for air. Tears streamed down her face, soaking into the pillow. She wasn't crying, exactly. Her body was just purging the agony in any way it could find. Caleb cleaned the wound with more whiskey, then stitched it closed with neat, precise movements. His hands were gentler now, almost tender. When he finished, he bandaged her shoulder and helped her roll onto her side. "Drink this," he said, pressing a tin cup to her lips. Lena drank without questioning what it was. The whiskey burned going down, harsh and cleansing. Caleb made her finish the whole cup, then covered her with a blanket. "Rest," he said. "I'll keep watch. Samuel won't find us tonight. Even if he tracked us this far, he won't navigate that canyon in the dark." Caleb pulled a chair over to the window, settling into it with his rifle across his knees. "Come morning, we'll figure out what comes next." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to warn him about what he'd gotten himself into. Marcus Trent didn't forgive, and he didn't forget. Anyone who helped her would pay the same price she would when they finally caught up. But exhaustion was pulling her under, relentless as a riptide. Why? She managed to ask before the darkness claimed her. Why help me? Caleb was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. Because I could, he said simply. And because I've run from enough things in my life. Felt like time to stand still for once. It wasn't really an answer, but Lena didn't have the strength to push for more. She let herself drift, trusting this stranger with the storm cloud eyes to keep her alive through the night. When Lena woke, pale dawn light was filtering through the cabin windows. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep, persistent ache, but the sharp agony had dulled to something more manageable. She could think again, could string thoughts together without the haze of shock. Caleb still sat by the window, though he'd switched to a different chair, one that gave him a view of the canyon entrance. The rifle remained across his knees. He looked like he hadn't slept, but his eyes were alert, scanning the horizon with methodical precision. "Morning," he said without turning around. Lena pushed herself upright, moving slowly to avoid jarring her shoulder. "You stayed up all night." Seemed prudent. "He's not coming. You sure about that?" Now Caleb did turn to look at her, one eyebrow raised. Lena considered the question honestly. Samuel was good at his job, tracking, hunting, bringing back what Marcus Trent considered his property, but he was also practical. He wouldn't risk breaking his neck in that canyon in the dark, not when he could wait for daylight and better odds. "He'll come," she admitted, "but not yet. He'll wait until he's got clear advantage." Caleb nodded, like she'd confirmed something he already knew. "Then we've got time. You hungry?" Lena's stomach answered for her, growling loud enough to hear across the room. Caleb's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. He stood, stretching the kinks from his back, and moved to the stove. Soon the cabin filled with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Lena watched him work, trying to reconcile this domestic scene with the man who'd carved a bullet out of her back last night without flinching. "You a doctor?" she asked. "No." "Learn it in the war?" "Wasn't in the war." Lena waited, but Caleb didn't elaborate. He just plated up the food and brought it over, handing her a fork and a cup of coffee so strong it could strip paint. They ate in silence for a while. The food was simple but good, and Lena devoured every bite. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a meal she didn't have to steal or beg for. "You need to tell me what I'm dealing with," Caleb said eventually. "Who's hunting you, and why?" Lena set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. This was the part she'd been dreading, laying it all out, watching this stranger's expression shift from neutral to disgusted. But he'd earned the truth. He'd saved her life, after all. "Marcus Trent," she said. The name tasted like ashes. "He owns the Triple T Ranch, about 30 miles south of Ordell, biggest spread in the territory." "I know the place." Caleb's tone was carefully neutral. I worked there. Sort of." Lena stared at her hands, unable to meet his eyes. "My father sold me to him 4 years ago. I was 16. The words hung in the air between them, ugly and irrevocable. "I see," Caleb said quietly. "Do you?" Lena's head snapped up, anger flaring hot and sudden in her chest. "Do you really see? Because most people, they hear sold and they think I'm making it up. Think I'm some whore who ran off and needs a good story to cover her tracks. I don't think that." "Why not? You don't know me." Caleb met her gaze steadily. "Because I saw that bullet hole in your back, and I've known enough men like Marcus Trent to recognize what they're capable of." Lena deflated, the anger draining out as quickly as it had come. She was so tired. Tired of running, tired of explaining, tired of carrying the weight of what had been done to her. "He calls me his ward," she said. "That's the legal fiction. Says he took me in out of charity when my father died of drink. But everyone at the ranch knows the truth. I was property. His property. And when I tried to leave," she gestured to her bandaged shoulder, "he sent Samuel to bring me back. Samuel's the tracker. Samuel's a killer. He just happens to be good at tracking too." Caleb considered this, his expression thoughtful. "How'd you get away the first time?" "Luck and desperation." Lena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, savoring the warmth. "Marcus rode to Santa Fe on business, took most of his men with him. I saw my chance and I ran. Thought if I could make it to Ordell, maybe catch a stage heading east. But Samuel was waiting. Samuel's always waiting. Lena's voice was bitter. Marcus doesn't trust me. Never has. Probably had Samuel watching the whole time just to see if I'd try something stupid. Running's not stupid, isn't it? Look where it got me. Lena gestured around the cabin. Bleeding in a stranger's bed, with a killer on my trail, and nowhere left to run. You're alive, Caleb pointed out. That's not nothing. For how long? Samuel won't stop. And Marcus? She shook her head. Marcus Trent is the kind of man who breaks things that don't obey. He'll come himself if he has to, and when he does, then we'll deal with it. Lena stared at him. We'll deal with it? This isn't your fight. You're in my cabin. That makes it my fight. You don't understand what you're saying. Marcus owns half the law in this territory. He's got money, influence, men willing to die for him. You can't fight that alone. Who said anything about fighting? Caleb stood, collecting their plates. I said we deal with it. That's not the same thing. Then what? First you heal. Can't make smart decisions when you're half dead. He dumped the dishes in a bucket of water, then turned back to face her. Second, we figure out what you want. Not what you think you can get, or what's practical, or what's safest. What you actually want. Lena opened her mouth, then closed it again. No one had ever asked her that before. What she wanted. The question felt foreign, almost offensive in its simplicity. I want to be free, she said finally. I want to go somewhere Marcus Trent can't reach me. Somewhere I can sleep without jumping at shadows. That it? Isn't that enough? Caleb tilted his head, studying her with those storm cloud eyes. Most people, they want more than just absence of bad things. They want something to move toward, not just away from. Lena looked away. He was right, but acknowledging it felt dangerous. Wanting more than survival felt like tempting fate. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't let myself think that far ahead. Fair enough. Caleb moved back to his post by the window. We'll start with staying alive, work our way up from there. The rest of the day passed in quiet routine. Caleb checked her bandages, made her eat again despite her protests that she wasn't hungry. He was gruff about it, but attentive, noticing when the pain got bad enough that she couldn't hide it, dosing her with whiskey and willow bark tea without being asked. By late afternoon, Lena felt strong enough to sit at the table instead of languishing in bed. Caleb was cleaning his rifle, the components spread across the scarred wood surface in neat rows. His hands moved with practiced ease, each motion economical and precise. Where'd you learn to shoot? Lena asked. Here and there? You're not much for conversation, are you? Caleb's mouth twitched again, that almost smile. Seems like you're doing enough talking for both of us. Lena surprised herself by laughing. It hurt her shoulder, but the sound felt good, normal, almost. Like she was a person instead of just a problem to be solved. Can I ask you something? She said. You're going to anyway. Why do you live out here? All alone, I mean. This is about as far from civilization as a person can get. Caleb was quiet for a moment, his hands going still on the rifle parts. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Same reason as you, probably, looking for somewhere Marcus Trent can't reach. Lena sat up straighter, ignoring the twinge in her shoulder. You know him? Knew of him. Our paths crossed once upon a time. And I decided I preferred the company of rocks and pine trees to men like that. Caleb reassembled the rifle with quick, sure movements. Been out here 5 years now. Suits me fine. There was a story there, Lena could tell. Something dark and unfinished, wrapped in the same kind of silence she recognized in herself. But before she could push, Caleb's whole body went taut. Someone's coming, he said quietly. Lena's heart kicked into overdrive. Samuel? Can't tell yet. Single rider, moving slow. Caleb moved to the door, rifle in hand. Stay back from the windows. Lena did as she was told, her pulse hammering in her ears. The cabin felt suddenly smaller, the walls too thin to stop a bullet. She watched Caleb position himself beside the door, his body coiled and ready. The hoofbeats grew closer, then stopped. A long silence followed. Caleb Ridge, a voice called out, male, older, with an edge of authority. I know you're in there. I'm not here for trouble. Caleb's jaw tightened. That depends on your definition of trouble, Sheriff. Sheriff! Lena's stomach dropped. Of course. Of course Marcus would have the law on his side. "I'm looking for a girl," the sheriff continued. "Young woman, dark hair, about 20 years old, goes by Lena Cross. You seen anyone like that?" Caleb glanced at Lena. In his eyes, she saw the question, "What do you want me to do?" Everything in Lena screamed at her to hide, to deny, to keep running. But she was tired of running, tired of letting men make decisions about her life without her input. She stood, ignoring Caleb's sharp gesture to stay down, and moved to the door. "I'm here," she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. Silence. Then, "Miss Cross, I'm going to need you to come out here, nice and slow." "She's injured," Caleb said, "and she's not going anywhere until I know why you're looking for her." "That's not your call to make, Ridge. In my house it is." Another long silence. Lena could practically hear the sheriff calculating his odds, weighing the cost of forcing the issue against the benefit of walking away. "Marcus Trent filed a report," the sheriff said finally. "Says his ward ran off without permission. He's worried about her welfare. Just wants her brought home safe." "His ward." Lena's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Is that what he told you?" "That's what the papers say. Legal and proper. Signed by your late father and witnessed by My father was drunk," Lena interrupted. "He sold me for $200 and a promise of whiskey. Those papers are bullshit, and you know it." "Watch your language, girl." "Or what? You'll drag me back so Marcus can finish what Samuel started?" Lena's hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. "There's a bullet hole in my back, Sheriff. Samuel put it there on Marcus Trent's orders. That the kind of welfare you're so concerned about?" The sheriff didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had lost some of that official edge. "Miss Cross, I understand you're upset, but the law is the law. Those papers give Mr. Trent legal guardianship until you're 21. If you've got grievances, there's proper channels that lead straight back to Marcus," Lena said. "He owns you, Sheriff. Maybe not with papers, but with money and favors and all the little compromises you've made over the years. So don't stand out there and talk to me about proper channels when we both know they don't exist." More silence. Lena could feel Caleb's eyes on her, but she kept her focus on the closed door. "I'll tell Mr. Trent I didn't find you," the sheriff said finally. "But that's all I can do. Rest is between you and him. That's all I'm asking." Hoofbeats retreated, fading into the distance. Lena waited until she couldn't hear them anymore, then let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her legs felt shaky, threatening to give out. Caleb caught her elbow, steadying her. "That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. He'll tell Trent where you are." "I know." Lena met his eyes. "But at least now it's out in the open. No more wondering when the other shoe's going to drop." Caleb studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. "You've got steel in you," he said. "That's good. You're going to need it." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. Her shoulder ached, but it was more than that. The confrontation with the sheriff had cracked something open inside her. All the fear and anger she'd been carrying for 4 years, suddenly demanding to be acknowledged. She sat at the table, staring out the window at the darkness beyond. Caleb had taken the bed without argument, though she suspected he was no more asleep than she was. "Tell me about him," she said quietly. "Marcus Trent. You said your paths crossed." For a while, Caleb didn't answer. Then she heard the bed creak as he sat up. 7 years ago, he said, "I worked a cattle drive. Long haul from Texas to Montana. We stopped at the Triple T to water the herd, trade some supplies. Trent invited us to stay the night. Hospitality, he called it." Lena waited. "There was a girl," Caleb continued, "Mexican. Couldn't have been more than 15. She worked in the kitchen, kept her eyes down, moved like she was afraid of her own shadow. I asked one of the hands about her. He laughed. Said she belonged to Trent, same as the cattle and the horses. Said Trent had a taste for young ones, and anyone who objected tended to have accidents." Lena's throat felt tight. "I should have done something," Caleb said. "Should have, I don't know, something, but I didn't. Told myself it wasn't my business. Took my pay and rode north and spent the next 7 years trying not to think about that girl's eyes." "It wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it? I saw what was happening. I knew it was wrong, and I did nothing." Caleb's voice was rough. "When I caught you yesterday, when I saw that bullet hole, I guess I saw a chance to balance the scales. Little late, maybe, but better than nothing. Lena turned to look at him. In the dim light, his face was shadowed, harsh lines and old regrets. You saved my life, she said. That's not nothing. It's not enough either. Maybe not, but it's a start. They sat together in the darkness, two damaged people trying to find solid ground. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Lena thought about the sheriff's visit, about Marcus receiving that report, about Samuel, out there in the dark, planning his next move, about all the ways this could go wrong. But she also thought about Caleb's steady hands stitching her wound, about his refusal to hand her over, even with the law demanding it, about the way he'd looked at her when she stood her ground with the sheriff, like she was someone worth believing in. What happens now? She asked. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Now we get ready, because Marcus Trent's coming, and when he does, we're going to need more than luck and good intentions. You really think we can stop him? I think we can try. And sometimes trying is enough to change everything. Lena wanted to believe him. Against all logic and experience, she wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this story could have a different ending than all the others. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for catching me when I fell. You're welcome, Lena Cross. And in that moment, sitting in a stranger's cabin with a killer on her trail and a powerful man bent on destroying her, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. It was fragile and probably foolish, but it was real. And for now, that was enough. 3 days passed before Marcus Trent made his move, and Lena spent every one of them learning what it meant to be truly restless. Her shoulder was healing, slower than she wanted, faster than Caleb expected. But the waiting gnawed at her nerves worse than any physical pain. Caleb kept busy. He reinforced the cabin shutters, checked his ammunition supply, rode the perimeter of his small valley each morning before dawn. He moved with the efficiency of a man who'd prepared for violence before, though he never spoke about when or where. Lena watched him work and tried not to think about what was coming. On the 4th morning, she woke to find him standing at the window, his body rigid in a way that sent alarm racing through her veins. What is it? She asked, already swinging her legs out of bed. The movement pulled at her stitches, but she ignored the sting. Riders, 4 of them, coming up the canyon. Caleb's voice was flat, emotionless. Samuel's in front. Don't recognize the others. Lena's mouth went dry. She moved to the window, careful to stay back from the glass. The riders were still distant, but she could make out Samuel's distinctive gray hat, the way he sat his horse like he was part of the animal itself. Marcus isn't with them, she said. He wouldn't come himself. Not yet. Caleb turned to face her. This is a test. He wants to see what we're made of before he commits. Then what do? We talk. For now. Caleb picked up his rifle, checked the chamber with practiced hands. But Lena, if this goes bad, if shooting starts, you get to the root cellar and you stay there. Understand? Like hell, I'm not hiding while you're still healing. You can barely lift your left arm above your shoulder. Caleb's tone brooked no argument. This fight needs to stay controlled, and it can't be controlled if I'm worried about you catching a stray bullet. Lena wanted to protest, but she knew he was right. Her shoulder screamed every time she moved wrong, and she couldn't even hold a rifle steady with both hands. She'd be a liability, not an asset. Fine, she said, but I want a gun anyway. Caleb's mouth twitched, that ghost of a smile she was learning to recognize. He went to a wooden chest in the corner, pulled out a small revolver with a worn grip. 6 shots. Don't waste them. The weight of the gun in her hand felt both foreign and necessary. Lena checked the cylinder like her father had taught her a lifetime ago, before the drink had hollowed him out and made him capable of selling his own daughter. The riders were closer now, close enough that Lena could see the hardness in Samuel's face, the casual way the other 3 men carried their weapons. Hired guns, probably. The kind who'd shoot a woman in the back for the right price and sleep fine afterward. Caleb positioned himself by the door again, rifle ready, but not raised. Remember, cellar if it goes bad. I remember. The hoofbeats stopped outside. Lena heard saddle leather creaking, boots hitting dirt. Then Samuel's voice, smooth as oil and twice as slick. Morning, Ridge. Hell of a place you got here. Man could hide from the world in a spot like this. That's the idea, Caleb called back. What do you want, Samuel? You know what I want? You got something belongs to Mr. Trent. I've got a woman with a bullet hole in her back. That what you're referring to? A pause. Lena could picture Samuel's expression, that cold calculation that never quite reached his eyes. That was unfortunate, Samuel said. Girl spooked. I was aiming for her leg, just trying to slow her down. She zigged when she should have zagged. That's horse shit, and we both know it. Maybe so, but it doesn't change the facts. She's Mr. Trent's legal ward, and she belongs at the ranch. Now, we can do this easy, or we can do it hard. I'm fine with either, but I suspect you'd prefer easy. Caleb glanced at Lena. She shook her head, a small, sharp movement. No, she wasn't going back. Not now, not ever. She's not going anywhere, Caleb said. That's disappointing, real disappointing. Samuel's voice hardened. See, Mr. Trent, he's a reasonable man. Sent me to offer you compensation for your trouble. $500? Gold. That's more money than most men see in a year. All you got to do is step aside. Lena's breath caught. $500. For a man living alone in the mountains, that was a fortune. Enough to buy supplies for years, maybe even relocate somewhere more hospitable. She wouldn't blame Caleb if he took it. It was the smart play. But Caleb just laughed, a short, harsh sound. Tell Marcus Trent he can take his $500 and— Careful now, Samuel interrupted. No need for unpleasantness. I'm trying to be civilized here. Then be civilized somewhere else. This conversation's over. Silence stretched out, taut as a bowstring. Lena's hand tightened on her revolver, her heart hammering against her ribs. You're making a mistake, Samuel said finally. Mr. Trent's a patient man, but patience runs out. When it does, he doesn't forget who chose the wrong side. I'll take my chances. Will you? What about the law? Sheriff's already been here once. Easy enough to get him back with a proper warrant. Maybe bring a federal marshal too if needed. Then it's not about right and wrong anymore. It's about obstructing justice. Caleb's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. If the law wants to come calling, that's their business. But you and your boys need to clear out before someone gets hurt. Another long pause. Then Samuel laughed, a genuine sound this time, though there was no humor in it. All right, Ridge, have it your way. But you should know, Mr. Trent always gets what belongs to him. Always. Whether it takes a week or a month or a year, he gets it. And the longer it takes, the worse it goes for everyone involved. I'll sleep on that. You do that. Boys, let's ride. The sound of horses moving away should have brought relief, but Lena felt nothing but dread coiling tighter in her gut. This wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. Caleb stayed by the door until the hoofbeats faded completely, then let out a long breath. His shoulders dropped a fraction, tension bleeding out. That went better than expected, he said. Better? Lena stared at him. They threatened to bring federal marshals. They threatened a lot of things. Doesn't mean they'll do them. Caleb set his rifle down, rolled his shoulders. Samuel's testing, like I said, seeing if money works before resorting to violence. And when violence doesn't work, then Marcus Trent will have to decide how badly he wants you back, how much blood he's willing to spill, how much attention he's willing to attract. Caleb met her eyes. Men like that, they're used to getting their way quietly. Make enough noise, force them into the open, and suddenly they've got problems they can't buy their way out of. Lena wanted to believe him, but 4 years with Marcus had taught her the man's capacity for cruelty. He didn't just break things, he ground them to dust and scattered the remains. You don't know him like I do, she said quietly. Maybe not, but I know men who think they're gods, and I know they bleed same as everyone else when you cut them. There was something dark in Caleb's voice, something that spoke of experience. Lena wondered again about his past, about what had driven him to this isolated valley. But before she could ask, he changed the subject. We need supplies. Enough for a siege, if it comes to that. A siege? Worst case scenario. Samuel comes back with more men, tries to wait us out. Caleb moved to the shelves, taking inventory. We've got maybe 2 weeks of food if we're careful. Water's not a problem. There's a spring out back. But ammunition, medicine, basic necessities, we're low. Then we go to Ordell. Too risky. Samuel might have men watching the town. Then where? Caleb was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. There's a trading post about 15 miles north, small operation, run by a man named Dutch Cooper. We've done business before. He's discreet. You trust him? I trust him to value gold over gossip. That's enough. They left at dusk, moving through the canyon under cover of approaching darkness. Caleb had saddled both horses, his bay gelding and a smaller roan mare he kept for packing supplies. Lena rode the mare, grateful for the animal's gentle gait, even though every jostle still sent twinges through her healing shoulder. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like thrown dice. Caleb led them on narrow trails that barely deserved the name, winding through broken country where the rocks themselves seemed hostile. He rode with the confidence of a man who knew every stone and shadow, never hesitating at the countless forks and branches. How often do you make this run? Lena asked. Every few months, when I need something I can't make or hunt. Must get lonely. Caleb shrugged. Loneliness is relative. I've been in crowded rooms and felt more alone than I ever do out here. Lena understood that. The ranch had been full of people, hands and housekeepers and the constant parade of men doing business with Marcus. But she'd never felt more isolated than during those years, surrounded by people who either pitied her or envied Marcus's favor, but never quite saw her as human. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the horses' hooves on rock and the distant call of an owl. Lena found herself relaxing despite the circumstances, the rhythm of the ride almost meditative. Can I ask you something? She said eventually. You're going to anyway. She smiled despite herself. What made you stay? After that cattle drive 7 years ago, what brought you back to this territory? Caleb was quiet long enough that Lena thought he might not answer. Then he said, unfinished business, the kind that gnaws at you until you either settle it or it settles you. Did you settle it? Some of it. Enough to sleep most nights anyway. He glanced back at her. What about you? 4 years with Trent. Why run now? What changed? Lena hadn't expected the question turned back on her. She thought about lying, about giving some simple answer that wouldn't require explanation. But Caleb had earned honesty. He wanted to make it permanent, she said. Marcus. He'd been talking about marriage for months, but I thought it was just talk. Then I found out he'd already drawn up the papers, was going to make it official when he got back from Santa Fe. Her throat tightened. Once we were married, there'd be no escape, legal or otherwise. So you ran. So I ran, and Samuel shot me, and you caught me, and here we are. Here we are, Caleb echoed. The trading post appeared around midnight, a low structure built into the side of a hill, smoke curling from a stone chimney. Lamplight glowed in the windows, warm and inviting. Caleb dismounted, helped Lena down with careful hands. Let me do the talking, he said. Dutch is good people, but the less he knows about your situation, the safer he stays. They approached the door, and Caleb knocked. 3 slow raps followed by 2 quick ones. A code, Lena realized. The door opened immediately, revealing a barrel-chested man with a wild gray beard and eyes sharp as broken glass. Ridge, Dutch said, his voice a gravelly rumble. Been expecting you. Have you now? Word travels, girl with a bullet hole, man willing to stand against Marcus Trent. Dutch stepped aside, gesturing them in. That's the kind of story that gets around, even out here. The interior of the trading post was cramped but well organized, shelves lined with goods, a pot-bellied stove radiating heat, furs and blankets hanging from the rafters. Dutch locked the door behind them, then turned to study Lena with frank curiosity. You must be something special, he said, for Ridge to come out of his hermit hole. She's a woman in trouble, Caleb said before Lena could respond. That's all you need to know. Dutch laughed, a booming sound that filled the small space. Fair enough? What do you need? Ammunition, 44 and 38, medical supplies, bandages, carbolic acid, laudanum if you've got it, food that'll keep, coffee, whiskey. Planning for a war? Planning for a long winter. Dutch nodded slowly, still watching Lena. I can get you most of that. Ammunition's going to be expensive, though. There's been a run on it lately. Folks getting nervous about Apache trouble to the south. How expensive? 3 times normal. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. We'll take what we can carry. While Dutch gathered supplies, Lena wandered the trading post, examining the eclectic mix of goods. There were practical items, knives, rope, lantern oil, but also unexpected treasures. A set of leather-bound books, a music box with a delicate dancer frozen mid-twirl, a silver hand mirror with an ornate handle. She picked up the mirror, studying her reflection in the lamplight. The woman staring back looked older than 20, her face thinner than she remembered, dark circles shadowing her eyes. But there was something else there too, a hardness that hadn't existed 4 years ago. Marcus Trent had tried to break her, but instead he'd forged something he couldn't control. That mirror belonged to a gambler's wife, Dutch said, appearing beside her. He lost it in a poker game. She cried for 2 days before she left him. Lena set it down carefully. Seems like bad luck. Or a fresh start, depending on how you look at it. Dutch studied her with those sharp eyes. You running from Marcus Trent? Dutch, Caleb started, but Lena cut him off. Yes, good for you. That man's a cancer on this territory. Dutch's expression darkened. Lost a niece to him, years back. Found her in a ditch outside Ordell with her throat cut. Sheriff ruled it an accident. Fell off her horse, he said. Never mind that she'd been working at the Triple T the week before and disappeared sudden-like. The air in the trading post felt suddenly heavy. Lena's hand moved unconsciously to her throat. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be sorry, just stay alive. That'll be revenge enough. Dutch turned to Caleb. Your supplies are ready. No charge for the medical goods. Call it a gift. Dutch, I can't. You can and you will. Consider it payment for taking a stand. Dutch's smile was grim. Someone needs to. Law sure as hell won't. They packed the supplies onto the roan, working quickly and efficiently. When everything was secured, Dutch walked them to the door. One more thing, he said, pressing a small bundle into Caleb's hands. Extra powder and shot. And this. He handed Lena a knife in a leather sheath, small enough to conceal, sharp enough to matter. Might come a time you need it. Lena took the knife, feeling the weight of it. Thank you. Thank me by living. That's all the gratitude I need. The ride back to the cabin felt longer, weighted with the knowledge of what awaited them. Lena's shoulder ached from the journey, but she ignored it, focusing instead on the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her. Dutch's niece, she said. You knew about that. Suspected. Dutch never spoke of it directly, but I've seen the way he looks when Marcus Trent's name comes up. Caleb adjusted his grip on the reins. Men like Trent, they leave a trail of bodies. Most people are too scared to count them. And you're not? I'm terrified. But I'm tired of being scared more than I'm scared of dying. There's a difference. Lena thought about that. The distinction between fear and exhaustion, between self-preservation and the desperate need to mean something. She'd spent 4 years surviving, keeping her head down and her mouth shut. Maybe it was time to try living instead. They reached the cabin as dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Caleb helped Lena dismount, then set about unloading the supplies while she collapsed into a chair, her body trembling with exhaustion. Rest, Caleb said. I'll handle this. But Lena shook her head. Show me what to do. If we're preparing for war, I need to know how to fight it. Caleb paused, studying her. Then he nodded. All right. But first you eat and sleep. Can't learn anything when you're running on empty. He made breakfast, eggs and bacon, bread toasted over the stove. Lena ate mechanically, too tired to taste the food but needing the fuel. When she finished, Caleb pointed her to the bed. 4 hours, he said. Then we start. Lena slept hard and dreamless, her body surrendering to exhaustion. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and Caleb was cleaning weapons at the table. 3 rifles and 4 pistols laid out in neat rows. Feeling better? He asked without looking up. Some. Lena joined him at the table, eyeing the arsenal. That's a lot of firepower for one man. For one man, yes, but we're 2 now. Caleb pushed one of the rifles toward her. You know how to shoot? My father taught me. Before... She didn't finish the sentence. Before the drink. Before he sold her. Before everything went to hell. Show me. Lena picked up the rifle, feeling the familiar weight settle into her hands. She checked the chamber, sighted down the barrel, her movements automatic and sure. Caleb watched without comment, his expression unreadable. You'll do, he said finally. But knowing how to shoot and being willing to shoot are different things. You ever pull a trigger on a person? No? Think you could? Lena met his eyes, thinking about Samuel's bullet tearing through her back, about Marcus's hands on her, claiming ownership of her body and her future, about Dutch's niece in a ditch, and all the other women who'd disappeared into Marcus Trent's orbit and never escaped. Yes, she said. I could. Caleb nodded slowly. Good, because if Samuel comes back, he won't be offering money. He'll be offering blood. They spent the afternoon practicing, loading and unloading weapons until Lena could do it with her eyes closed, discussing fields of fire and angles of approach. Caleb moved through it all with the patience of a teacher and the precision of a soldier, though he still wouldn't talk about where he'd learned these skills. The canyon is our best defense, he explained, using stones on the table to represent the terrain. Single access point, narrow enough that riders have to come in one or two at a time, but it's also a trap. If they get behind us, we're boxed in with nowhere to run. So what do? We make sure they can't get behind us. I've got tripwires set up along the ridgeline. Anyone trying to climb down will make enough noise to wake the dead. And there's a back trail here. He indicated a spot on his makeshift map. It's rough going, barely wide enough for a horse, but it leads to the next valley over. Emergency exit, if we need it. You've thought about this before. I think about a lot of things. Comes from spending too much time alone with your thoughts. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Caleb called a halt. Lena's shoulder was screaming, but she'd managed the afternoon without complaint. Her left arm still had limited mobility, but her right was strong enough to handle a rifle. One more thing, Caleb said, pulling out the small revolver he'd given her earlier. This stays on you at all times. Doesn't matter if you're sleeping or eating or taking a piss. It stays within reach. Understood? Understood. And if they get past me, if something happens and you're alone, you aim for center mass and you keep firing until they drop, or you're empty. No warning shots, no trying to wound, you shoot to kill. The bluntness of it should have shocked her, but Lena found herself nodding. This was the reality they were living in now. Kill or be killed, simple as that. That night they ate in contemplative silence. Caleb had made stew from salted beef and vegetables, thick and hearty. Lena cleaned her bowl, then helped with the dishes, a domestic routine that felt surreal given the circumstances. How long do you think we have? She asked. Before Marcus makes his move? Hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. Men like that, they like to make a show of it. Let the anticipation build. You think he'll come himself? Eventually, but first he'll send more men, test our defenses, probe for weaknesses. Caleb dried the last plate, set it on the shelf. When he does come, it'll be with enough force to make an example. Show everyone what happens when you defy Marcus Trent. Then we can't be here when he comes. Caleb turned to look at her. You want to run? I want to survive. There's a difference. Is there? He studied her with those storm cloud eyes. Because it seems to me running is just another way of letting him win. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for the day he catches up. And standing here gets us killed. At least running buys time. Time for what? Time to keep hiding? Time to pretend you're free while you're still chained to fear? Caleb's voice was gentle, but firm. I didn't risk my neck pulling you off that prairie so you could spend your life as a ghost. Then what do you want from me? I want you to decide what you're willing to fight for, not what you're willing to die for. Any fool can throw their life away. I'm talking about what's worth living for. What's worth standing your ground over, even when the odds are shit and the smart money says run. Lena's hands clenched into fists. That's easy for you to say. You chose this life. You chose isolation, chose this valley, chose when and where to make your stand. I didn't get to choose anything. I got sold like livestock and spent 4 years being someone's property. So forgive me if I don't feel like dying for principle. I'm not asking you to die for principle. I'm asking you to live for yourself. Caleb's expression softened. You think I don't know what it's like to run? I spent 3 years running before I found this valley. 3 years looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, half dead from fear. And you know what I learned? What? That running doesn't make you free. It just makes you tired. Real freedom, the kind that actually means something, you have to take it. Force it into existence with your bare hands if you have to. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong. But looking at him now, this man who'd built a life in the middle of nowhere, who'd stepped out of isolation to help a stranger, who refused to bend even when the smart play was to fold. She couldn't find the words. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Good. Being scared means you understand what's at stake." Caleb moved to the window, staring out at the darkening valley. "But fear's like pain. It tells you something's wrong, but it doesn't get to make the decisions. You do." Lena joined him at the window, looking out at the land that had become her temporary refuge. The valley was beautiful in its harsh way, all sharp edges and hard truths, unforgiving but honest. "If we stay," she said slowly, "if we make our stand here, what happens after? Say we win, say Marcus backs down or gets killed or loses interest, then what? Then you get to decide. Go east like you planned, or stay, or head somewhere entirely new. Point is, it'll be your choice, not his, not mine, yours." The idea of having choices again, real choices that belonged to her alone, felt almost impossible to grasp. But maybe that was the point. Maybe freedom was supposed to feel impossible right up until the moment you claimed it. "Okay," Lena said. "Okay, we stay." Caleb's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Relief, maybe. Or recognition that they'd crossed some invisible threshold together. "Then tomorrow we start fortifying for real. Make this cabin into something they can't take easily." "Tomorrow," Lena agreed. They stood together at the window as full dark settled over the valley. Two people who'd found each other by accident and were choosing to stay together by design. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and stone and the promise of rain. Somewhere out there, Marcus Trent was planning his next move. Samuel was sharpening his knives and checking his guns. An army of hired violence was preparing to descend on this small valley and crush everything in its path. But here, in this moment, Lena Cross felt something she hadn't felt in 4 long years. She felt ready. The week that followed taught Lena more about survival than 4 years at the Triple T ever had. Caleb worked from dawn until dusk, transforming the cabin from a simple dwelling into something resembling a fortress, and he expected her to keep pace despite her healing shoulder. They started with the basics. Caleb reinforced the door with iron brackets salvaged from old wagon parts, then did the same for the shutters. He showed Lena how to stack sandbags, rough burlap filled with canyon dirt, along the walls facing the canyon mouth, creating barriers they could shoot from while staying protected. "Sandbags won't stop a rifle round completely," he explained, demonstrating the proper stacking technique. "But they'll slow it down enough to save your life. Maybe." "Maybe isn't much comfort," Lena said, hefting another bag into place. Her shoulder protested, but she gritted her teeth and ignored it. "Maybe is all we've got. Anyone who promises you certainty in a gunfight is either lying or stupid." By the 3rd day, Lena's hands were blistered and raw, her entire body aching from labor she wasn't accustomed to. But the cabin was starting to look defensible. They'd created firing positions at each window, stockpiled ammunition within easy reach, and organized their supplies so everything they might need was accessible without exposing themselves to gunfire. Caleb taught her the layout by making her practice in the dark, timing her as she moved from one position to another, loading and reloading weapons until the motions became automatic. When she fumbled or moved too slowly, he made her start over. "You're being too hard on her," she muttered after the 5th failed run. "I'm keeping you alive," Caleb corrected. "When bullets start flying, you won't have time to think. Your body needs to know what to do before your brain does." He was right, but that didn't make it less frustrating. Lena had never been a soldier, never trained for combat. Everything felt clumsy and wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. On the 4th night, as they sat cleaning weapons by lamplight, Caleb broke his usual silence. "You're getting better," he said. Lena looked up, surprised. Praise from Caleb Ridge was rarer than rain in August. "Don't sound so shocked," he continued. "You've got decent instincts, just needed refining." "Decent instincts didn't stop me from getting shot." "No, but they kept you running long enough to find help. That counts for something." Caleb set down the rifle he'd been working on. "Most people, they freeze when violence comes. You didn't. That's the hardest part to teach." I was terrified. Being terrified and being frozen aren't the same thing. Terror just means you're paying attention. Lena thought about that while she worked a cleaning rod through a pistol barrel. Terror as attention. It made a strange kind of sense. Can I ask you something? She said. You're going to anyway. She smiled despite herself. Where did you learn all this? The fortifications, the tactics, the way you move like you've done this before? Caleb's hand stilled on the rifle. For a long moment, he didn't answer, and Lena thought she'd pushed too far. Then he sighed, a sound like wind through empty rooms. I was a ranger, he said quietly. Texas Rangers, for 6 years, chased rustlers and bandits, kept the peace in places where peace was just a polite fiction. Lena hadn't expected that. She'd imagined a lot of possibilities, soldier, outlaw, hired gun, but not a lawman. What made you quit? I didn't quit. I got fired. Caleb's laugh was bitter. Turns out rangers are supposed to follow orders, even when those orders are to look the other way, while powerful men do terrible things. Marcus Trent? Among others. But yeah, he was part of it. Captain ordered me to drop an investigation into some missing women, girls who'd worked at the Triple T and disappeared. Said we didn't have jurisdiction, that it was a local matter. Caleb's jaw tightened. I kept digging anyway. Found enough evidence to bring charges. Then my captain called me in, told me I was done. Said I'd exceeded my authority and damaged important relationships. They protected him. They protected his money. That's how it works. Justice is for people who can afford it. Everyone else just gets whatever scraps fall off the table. The bitterness in his voice was familiar. Lena had heard it in her own thoughts often enough. Is that why you came back here? To finish what you started? Partly. Also because I didn't know where else to go. Spent 3 years drifting, taking work where I could find it, but it all felt empty. At least here, I knew what I was running from. He met her eyes. Until you showed up, I thought I was done fighting. Turns out I was just waiting for something worth fighting for. The weight of those words settled between them. Lena wanted to say something meaningful, something that acknowledged what he'd sacrificed, but the words felt inadequate. Thank you, she said finally. For waiting. Caleb's expression softened. Thank you for giving me a reason to. The moment stretched, fragile and honest, before Caleb cleared his throat and went back to cleaning his rifle. But something had shifted between them, an understanding that went deeper than their shared circumstance. The attack came on the 7th day, just before dawn, when the world was caught between darkness and light. Lena woke to Caleb's hand over her mouth, his eyes urgent in the pre-dawn gloom. She nodded, understanding, and he removed his hand, already moving to the window. She grabbed her rifle and followed, her heart hammering. How many? She whispered. 8, maybe 9. Caleb's voice was barely audible. They're trying to surround us, 4 coming through the canyon, the rest attempting the ridge. Lena moved to the opposite window, peering through the shutters. Sure enough, she could make out shadowy figures picking their way down the steep canyon wall, moving with the careful silence of men who knew their business. The tripwires? She asked. Haven't triggered yet. Either they spotted them or they're better than I expected. A bell suddenly clanged in the distance, one of Caleb's early warning systems. The figures on the ridge froze, then scrambled for cover as Caleb's rifle barked, the muzzle flashed bright in the dim light. So much for the quiet approach, Caleb said, already working the lever to chamber another round. Gunfire erupted from the canyon mouth, wild shots meant to pin them down while the men on the ridge found positions. Bullets thudded into the cabin walls, splintered the shutters. Lena ducked instinctively, her pulse racing. Return fire, Caleb ordered. Don't let them get comfortable. Lena raised her rifle, sighted on a muzzle flash, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted her injured shoulder, sending pain radiating down her arm, but she ignored it and fired again. She had no idea if she hit anything, but the shooter she'd targeted stopped firing. The battle settled into a rhythm. Bursts of gunfire followed by tense silence as both sides reloaded and repositioned. Caleb moved between windows with practiced efficiency, never exposing himself for more than a second, never wasting ammunition on shots that didn't have a purpose. Left window, he called out. 2 of them trying to flank. Lena shifted position, spotted the movement. 2 men were using the rocks for cover, working their way closer to the cabin. She fired, missed, fired again. The second shot caught one of them in the leg, and he went down hard, screaming. The sound cut through the chaos, raw and human and terrible. Lena's stomach clenched, but she forced herself to chamber another round. This was what she'd agreed to. This was survival. Good shot, Caleb said, and there was no judgment in his voice. just acknowledgement of necessity. The fight continued as the sun crept over the ridge, painting everything in shades of blood and gold. The attackers were professional enough to know when to advance and when to hold, but they were also impatient. They'd expected an easy target, not a fortified position defended by someone who knew what he was doing. One of the men on the ridge made a break for better cover, silhouetted against the rising sun. Caleb's rifle cracked, and the man dropped like a puppet with cut strings. He didn't scream, didn't move, just fell. Lena watched him fall and felt something cold settle in her chest. This was real. People were dying. Maybe people who were just doing a job, following orders, trying to earn money to send home to families. Or maybe they were killers who'd signed on knowing exactly what Marcus Trent wanted from them. She couldn't afford to care which. "Cease fire," a voice called from the canyon. Samuel. "Cease fire, we're pulling back." The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, Lena could hear her own breathing, harsh and ragged. Smoke hung in the air, acrid and choking. Caleb didn't lower his rifle. "If you're pulling back, then pull back. Otherwise keep shooting so I know where to aim." "We've got wounded," Samuel called. "I'm coming out under truce to collect them. Don't shoot." "Come on then. But keep your hands where I can see them." Samuel emerged from behind a boulder, hands raised, his gray hat missing and blood on his shirt. He walked with deliberate slowness toward the wounded man Lena had shot, never taking his eyes off the cabin. "Hell of a fort you've built, Ridge," he said conversationally. "Wasn't expecting this level of preparation." That was the idea. Samuel reached his wounded companion, helped the man to his feet. The injured man's face was gray with pain, his leg a mess of blood and torn fabric. "This doesn't change anything," Samuel said. "You know that, right? Mr. Trent will just send more men, better men." "Let him send an army. Result will be the same." "Will it?" Samuel's smile was cold. "How much ammunition you got, Ridge? How long can you hold out? Week? 2 weeks?" "We can wait." "Can you?" Caleb didn't answer, just kept his rifle trained on Samuel's chest. Samuel dragged his wounded companion back toward cover, then called out again. "Think about it. This is just the opening round. It gets worse from here." Then they were gone, retreating down the canyon with their wounded and their dead. Lena counted 3 bodies left behind, men who wouldn't be going home to anyone. She lowered her rifle, suddenly aware of how badly her hands were shaking. The adrenaline that had kept her focused during the fight was draining away, leaving her hollow and sick. "You did good," Caleb said quietly. "I shot a man. He was trying to kill you. That's not murder. That's survival." "Doesn't feel like there's much difference." Caleb moved to her side, gently took the rifle from her trembling hands. "There is. And you'll understand that eventually. Right now you're in shock. That's normal." "Normal," Lena repeated numbly. "Nothing about this is normal." "No, but it's necessary." Caleb guided her to a chair. "Sit. I'll check the perimeter, make sure they're really gone." He was out the door before she could protest, moving with the same careful precision he'd shown during the fight. Lena sat in the chair and stared at her hands, still seeing the man fall when she'd shot him. She'd wanted to fight back, wanted to prove she wasn't helpless, but she hadn't considered what fighting back would actually cost. The weight of it, the permanence. Caleb returned 20 minutes later, his expression grim. "They're gone. Left for their dead, probably planning to come back with a wagon to collect them." He began reloading weapons, his movements automatic. "We need to move." Lena looked up. "What? Why?" "Because Samuel was right. They'll regroup and come back with more men. This cabin is defensible, but it's also a trap. They know where we are, know our defenses. Next time they'll bring enough guns to overwhelm us through sheer numbers." "Then where do we go?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, thinking. "About 20 miles west, there's an old ranch. Been abandoned for years. Previous owner died and his family never claimed it. It's bigger than this place, more room to maneuver. And more importantly, they won't expect us to relocate." "You want to abandon the cabin? After all the work we did?" "I want us to survive. The cabin doesn't matter if we're dead." Caleb met her eyes. "This isn't retreat, Lena. It's strategy. We make them come to us on ground we choose, not ground they already know." Lena understood the logic, but leaving felt like giving up. This cabin had become their sanctuary, their fortress. Walking away from it seemed like admitting Marcus had won. "How long do we have?" she asked. If Samuel's smart, he'll wait until he's got at least a dozen men. That gives us maybe 2 days, 3 at most. Caleb began gathering supplies. We move tonight. Travel dark, cover our tracks. By the time they come back here, we'll be ghosts. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Caleb showed Lena how to pack efficiently. Weapons and ammunition first, then food, then everything else only if there was room. They took turns sleeping in short shifts, making sure someone was always watching the canyon mouth. As evening approached, Caleb saddled the horses while Lena did one final sweep of the cabin. It felt strange, knowing she'd never see this place again. It hadn't been home. She'd only been here a week, but it had been shelter, safety, however temporary. She found the small revolver Caleb had given her that first night, tucked it into her belt. Then she picked up the knife Dutch had given her at the trading post, slipped it into her boot. Small weapons, easily concealed, the kind you kept close because you couldn't trust the world to be kind. "Ready?" Caleb asked from the doorway. "As I'll ever be." They rode out as darkness fell, moving slowly to avoid making noise. Caleb led them on a circuitous route, doubling back several times to confuse their trail. Lena followed, trusting his knowledge of the country, even though she couldn't see more than a few feet ahead in the moonless night. The abandoned ranch appeared near midnight, a sprawling complex of buildings in various states of decay. The main house was a 2-story structure with a sagging porch and broken windows. Outbuildings clustered around it like drunken companions. A barn missing half its roof, a bunkhouse with collapsed walls, a stable that looked more solid than the rest. "It's not much," Caleb admitted, "but the stable's sound and there's a well that still works. We can fortify the main house, use the outbuildings for cover and crossfire." They spent the next 2 days transforming the ranch from abandoned ruin to defensible position. It was harder work than preparing the cabin had been. More space to cover, more weak points to address. But it was also more versatile. They had multiple buildings to work with, multiple firing positions, multiple escape routes. Caleb's tactical mind came alive planning the defense. He positioned supplies in different buildings so they wouldn't lose everything if one location was overrun. He set up overlapping fields of fire so every approach could be covered from at least 2 angles. He even rigged false walls in the barn where they could hide if things went completely wrong. Lena watched him work and marveled at the transformation. The quiet hermit she'd met was gone, replaced by someone who moved with purpose and authority. This was the Texas Ranger, she realized, the man who'd hunted bad men across wild country and lived to tell about it. On the 3rd night, as they sat in the main house eating cold beans straight from the can, Lena finally asked the question that had been bothering her. "Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's to balance the scales or make up for the past. There's more to it than that." Caleb set down his can, stared out the broken window at the darkness beyond. "You ever feel like your whole life has been leading to one moment?" he asked. "Like everything you've done, every choice you've made was just preparation for something you didn't even know was coming?" "Maybe. That's what this feels like. I spent 6 years as a ranger, learning how to fight, how to track, how to survive. Then I spent 3 more years running, convincing myself I was done with all that. And then you fell into my arms with a bullet in your back, and suddenly everything clicked into place." He turned to look at her. "This isn't about balancing scales. It's about finally being the person I was supposed to be all along." "And who's that?" "Someone who stands when standing matters. Someone who fights back when fighting back costs everything." His expression was intense. "You showed me that, Lena. When you stood up to the sheriff, when you chose to stay and fight instead of run. You reminded me that some things are worth the price." Lena felt something crack open in her chest, a feeling too big and complicated to name. She'd spent 4 years being told she was property, that her wants and needs and very humanity didn't matter. And here was this man telling her she'd reminded him how to be brave. "I'm not brave," she said quietly. "Yes, you are. You just don't recognize it yet." Caleb stood, gathered the empty cans. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we finish preparations. Because Samuel's coming, and when he does, we're going to show Marcus Trent exactly what happens when he pushes people past their breaking point." Lena lay down on a bedroll in the corner, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept circling back to the fight at the cabin, to the man she'd shot, to the knowledge that more violence was coming. She'd chosen this path, chosen to stand instead of run. But choosing and living with the consequences were different things. Caleb sat by the window, rifle across his lap, silhouetted against the starlight. He looked solid and permanent, like the mountains themselves. Lena took comfort in that solidity even as a small voice in her head whispered that nothing was permanent, that everything could be taken away in a heartbeat. She pushed the voice down and closed her eyes, willing herself toward sleep. Whatever tomorrow brought, she needed to be ready. They came on the 5th day, and this time there was no subtlety to it. Lena spotted the dust cloud first, a telltale sign of multiple riders moving fast. She called to Caleb, who was reinforcing the barn doors, and he dropped his tools and came running. "How many?" he asked, squinting into the distance. "Can't tell yet. More than before." Caleb swore under his breath. "Get to the main house, 2nd floor, east window. That's your position." "What about you?" "I'll take the barn." Creates crossfire, makes them choose which target to focus on. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but gentle. "Remember everything we practiced. Controlled fire, conserve ammunition, and if things go bad, I run for the false wall in the barn. I know." "Good." He released her, then hesitated. "Lena, whatever happens today, you've got more strength than Marcus Trent could ever touch. Don't forget that." Then he was gone, sprinting toward the barn. Lena ran for the main house, taking the stairs 2 at a time despite her protesting shoulder. She positioned herself at the east window, rifle ready, and waited. The riders resolved out of the dust. 13 men this time, well armed and riding in formation. Samuel led them, his gray hat back in place, his face set in hard lines. But it was the man riding beside him that made Lena's blood run cold. Marcus Trent himself. Dressed in a black suit like he was attending a funeral, sitting his horse with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never been told no in his life. They stopped just out of rifle range, and Marcus dismounted with theatrical slowness. He was tall and broad-shouldered, handsome in a way that made Lena's skin crawl. She'd spent 4 years learning to read his moods, anticipating his wants, trying desperately to become invisible when his attention turned predatory. "Miss Cross," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "I know you can hear me. Come out and let's talk about this like reasonable people." Lena's hands tightened on her rifle. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to make herself small, to obey. 4 years of conditioning didn't disappear just because she decided to fight back. But she thought about Caleb's words, about strength Marcus couldn't touch, and forced herself to stay visible in the window. "I've got nothing to say to you," she called back. Marcus's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Now, is that any way to speak to the man who's taken care of you all these years, fed you, clothed you, kept you safe?" "Safe? You shot me in the back." "That was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Samuel here, he got a little overzealous. I've already disciplined him for it." Lena didn't believe that for a second. Samuel looked completely unrepentant. "Come home, Lena," Marcus continued. "All is forgiven. I understand you got scared that running seemed like your only option, but you're not thinking clearly. Where will you go? What will you do? You need me. I need you like I need a rope around my neck." Marcus's smile faltered. "You're being dramatic. I've given you a good life, better than you deserved, truth be told. Your father drank himself to death and left you with nothing. I saved you from that. You bought me. There's a difference." "Semantics." Marcus waved a dismissive hand. "The point is you belong to me. The law says so. And I always collect what's mine. I don't belong to anyone. Don't you?" Marcus's expression hardened. "You're 20 years old with no skills, no education, no family. You think you can make it on your own? You think this drifter you've attached yourself to will keep you safe?" He raised his voice. "Ridge, I know you're listening. I'm prepared to offer you $5,000 to walk away. That's enough to start a new life anywhere you want. All you have to do is hand her over." Caleb's voice came from the barn, calm and steady. "I'm not interested. 10,000 then. That's my final offer." "You could offer me the world and I'd still tell you to go to hell." Marcus's face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake, both of you. I have the law on my side. I have the guns. I have the patience to wait you out. This ends one way, with Lena coming home. The only question is how many people die before that happens." "Then I guess a lot of people are going to die," Lena said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Because I'm not going back. Not today, not ever. You can bring an army, Marcus. You can burn this whole place to the ground, but you'll never own me again. The words hung in the air between them, final and irrevocable. Marcus stared at her, and for the first time, Lena saw something like uncertainty flicker across his face. He'd expected her to fold, to cave under the weight of his authority and her own fear. He hadn't expected her to mean it. So be it, Marcus said quietly, then louder. Take the buildings. I want her alive, but I don't care about casualties otherwise. The 13 men spread out, taking cover behind rocks and the remains of a collapsed shed. Lena's heart hammered as she watched them position themselves, professional and methodical. This was it. This was the moment everything had been building toward. She settled her rifle against her shoulder, sighted on the nearest target, and waited for Caleb's signal. When it came, a single shot from the barn that dropped the leftmost rider, hell opened up and swallowed them whole. The gunfire was deafening. Lena had thought she understood what combat sounded like after the fight at the cabin, but this was different, heavier, more sustained, the sound of men committed to finishing what they'd started. She fired at movement, at muzzle flashes, at anything that looked like a target, and tried not to think about the fact that she was outnumbered 6-1. Caleb's rifle spoke in measured intervals from the barn, each shot deliberate and purposeful. He was picking his targets carefully, making every bullet count. Lena tried to do the same, but panic kept creeping in at the edges of her vision, making her hands shake. A bullet punched through the window frame 6 inches from her head, showering her with splinters. She ducked instinctively, pressing herself against the wall as more rounds chewed into the old wood. When she looked again, 3 of Marcus's men were making a run for the porch, using covering fire to close the distance. "Caleb!" she screamed. "They're coming to the house!" His rifle barked twice in rapid succession, and 2 of the 3 men went down. The third made it to the porch and pressed himself against the wall beneath Lena's window, out of her line of fire. She heard boots on the porch below, the sound of the front door being tested. It was barred from the inside, but how long would that hold? She grabbed the revolver from her belt and moved to the stairs, trying to remember everything Caleb had taught her about close-quarters fighting. The door crashed open with a splintering of wood. Lena heard heavy footsteps in the main room below, then the creak of someone testing the staircase. She aimed at the top of the stairs, forcing her breathing to slow, forcing her hands to steady. A head appeared, a young man with a sparse beard and eyes wide with adrenaline. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. For a fraction of a second, they just stared at each other, 2 people who'd been thrust into violence neither of them had chosen. Then he raised his pistol and Lena fired first. The revolver kicked hard in her hand. The young man jerked backward, his own shot going wild into the ceiling. He tumbled down the stairs in a tangle of limbs and came to rest at the bottom, not moving. Lena's stomach heaved. She'd killed him, not wounded, not driven off, killed. She could see his face, could see the surprise frozen there, could see. Another gunshot from outside snapped her back to the present. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Not yet. She moved back to the window, reloading the revolver with shaking hands. The battle had shifted. Marcus's men had taken cover in the collapsed shed and behind the old well, laying down suppressing fire, while 2 more attempted to flank around to the barn. Caleb was pinned, unable to leave his position without exposing himself. Lena took aim at one of the flanking men and fired, missed, fired again. This time she hit him in the shoulder and he spun around, dropping his rifle. Before she could fire a third time, return fire from the shed forced her to duck. "Lena!" Caleb's voice carried across the chaos. "The barn's compromised. I'm coming to you." She watched him burst from the barn door, running in a zigzag pattern as bullets kicked up dirt around his feet. One caught him high on the left arm, and he staggered but kept moving. Lena provided covering fire, shooting at anything that moved near the shed, and somehow Caleb made it to the house. He crashed through the door and up the stairs, breathing hard, blood soaking his sleeve. "How bad?" Lena asked, already reaching for the bandages they'd stashed in every room. "Through and through. I'll live." He moved to the window, assessed the situation. "They're regrouping. We dropped 5, maybe 6. That still leaves too many. What do we do? We hold until dark, then we run. It's the only play we've got left. That's hours away. Then we make every minute count." Caleb reloaded his rifle with practiced efficiency despite his wounded arm. "Watch the west side. If they try another flanking maneuver, we need to know." The next hour was the longest of Lena's life. The shooting came in waves, periods of intense fire followed by tense silence as both sides conserved ammunition and repositioned. The house took a beating, walls pockmarked with bullet holes, windows shattered, furniture torn apart by lead. Lena's shoulder was screaming from the recoil of the rifle, her ears ringing from the constant gunfire. She was covered in plaster dust and splinters, her throat raw from smoke and shouting, but she kept firing, kept moving between positions, kept doing whatever Caleb told her to do. During one of the quiet periods, she heard Marcus's voice again. "This is pointless, Lena. You can't win. Even if you kill every man I brought today, I'll just bring more tomorrow. I have unlimited resources. What do you have?" Lena didn't answer. She was too tired, too focused on survival to spare energy for words. But Caleb called back, his voice steady despite his wound. "She's got something you'll never understand, Trent. She's got the will to be free, and that's worth more than all your money and all your guns." "Freedom?" Marcus laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Freedom to what? Die in a burned-out ranch in the middle of nowhere? Congratulations, Ridge. You've given her a real gift. Better to die free than live as someone's property. Easy words when it's not your life on the line." "It is my life on the line. That's the point you keep missing." Caleb fired a shot that came close enough to Marcus that the man had to dive for cover. Some of us would rather die standing than live on our knees. The shooting resumed with renewed intensity. Marcus's men were getting aggressive, taking bigger risks to close the distance. One managed to reach the barn and set it on fire. Orange flames licked at the old wood, black smoke billowing into the sky. "There goes our escape route," Caleb muttered, watching the barn burn. Lena felt despair settling over her like a heavy blanket. They were trapped, outnumbered, running low on ammunition. The sun was still high in the sky, hours yet before darkness could cover their retreat. And even if they made it to nightfall, where would they run? Marcus would just hunt them down again. "Maybe I should surrender," she said quietly. "No. Caleb, this is insane. You're bleeding. We're almost out of bullets, and they're going to kill you just to get to me. I won't let you die for this." Caleb turned to look at her, his expression fierce. "You don't get to make that choice. I decided what I'm fighting for, and I'm not backing down now. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. That's what makes it matter." Before Lena could argue further, she heard hoofbeats, lots of them, coming fast from the east. Her heart sank. Reinforcements. Marcus had brought even more men, but Caleb was staring out the window with an expression she couldn't read. "That's not Trent's people." Lena moved to look. A group of riders was approaching, at least 20 of them, armed and moving with purpose. Leading them was a familiar barrel-chested figure with a wild gray beard. "Dutch," Caleb breathed. The riders spread out, taking positions that cut off Marcus's line of retreat. Dutch himself rode right up to where Marcus was sheltering behind the well, dismounted, and planted himself in the open like he was daring someone to shoot him. "Marcus Trent!" Dutch's voice boomed across the battlefield. "This has gone far enough." Marcus emerged from cover, his face purple with rage. "Cooper, you've got no business here. This is a private matter." "Private matter my ass. You brought an army to murder 2 people. That stops being private and starts being everyone's problem. The girl is my legal ward. I have every right. You have the right to nothing." Dutch pulled a piece of paper from his coat. "This here is an affidavit signed by 3 witnesses, people who saw you force that girl into situations no ward should ever face. It's being filed with the territorial court as we speak." Marcus's expression went carefully blank. "Those are lies." "Maybe, maybe not. Point is, now there's an official investigation, which means you can't just disappear people who inconvenience you. Too many eyes watching now. Those witnesses will recant. I'll make sure of it." "Will you? Because one of them is a federal judge's daughter. Good luck making her disappear." Dutch stepped closer, his hand resting on his gun. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off your dogs and ride back to your ranch. Lena Cross is going to go free. No more hunting, no more harassment, and you're going to pray that investigation doesn't turn up anything criminal, because if it does, all your money won't save you." "You're bluffing." "Am I? You willing to bet everything on that?" Dutch gestured to the riders behind him. "These men here, they've all lost someone to you. Daughters, sisters, wives who went to work at your ranch and never came home. They want justice, Marcus, and right now I'm the only thing standing between you and a rope. Marcus looked at the assembled riders, at their hard faces and ready weapons. Lena saw the calculation in his eyes, saw him weighing options and finding them all wanting. This isn't over, Marcus said finally. Yeah, it is. You just don't know it yet. Dutch turned his back on Marcus, a deliberate insult. Someone get the doc up here. Ridge is bleeding. The next few hours passed in a blur. A doctor materialized from among Dutch's riders and patched up Caleb's arm while scolding him for being reckless. The dead were collected and loaded onto wagons. Marcus and his surviving men retreated toward the Triple T, defeated but not destroyed. Lena sat on the porch of the ruined ranch house, watching it all happen with a sense of unreality. It was over. After 4 years of captivity and a week of running and fighting, it was actually over. Dutch climbed the porch steps and settled beside her with a grunt. How you holding up? He asked. I don't know yet. Ask me in a week. Dutch chuckled. Fair enough. You did good, girl. Stood your ground when most people would have folded. I had help. Yeah, you did. Ridge is a good man. Stubborn as hell, but good. Dutch pulled out a pipe and started packing it with tobacco. That affidavit I mentioned, it's real. Judge's daughter came forward 2 days ago, said Trent had assaulted her at a social function. When word got out she was talking, 2 other women came forward with similar stories. The whole thing's about to blow wide open. Lena felt something loosen in her chest. He'll actually face consequences? Maybe. Probably. Men like Trent, they're good at wriggling out of trouble. But even if he beats the charges, his reputation's done. No one's going to trust him, do business with him. He'll be a pariah. Dutch lit his pipe, puffed thoughtfully. Sometimes that's justice enough, watching them lose everything they valued while they're still breathing. I want him in prison. I know you do, but wanting and getting are different things. You take what victories you can and you move forward. That's all any of us can do. Caleb emerged from the house, his arm bandaged and in a sling. He looked exhausted but relieved. He sat on Lena's other side, and for a moment the 3 of them just watched the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire. What now? Lena asked. Now you decide, Dutch said. You're free. Actually free this time. So where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Lena thought about that. She'd spent so long focused on escape that she'd never really considered what came after. The world was open to her now, full of possibilities she'd stopped letting herself imagine. I don't know, she admitted. I need time to figure it out. Then take time. Ridge's cabin is still standing. You could stay there while you get your bearings. Or head to Ordell, maybe catch that stage you were originally running for. Dutch paused. Or you could help me run the trading post. I could use someone with your grit. That's generous, but it's not generosity. It's good business. Someone who can shoot like you did today, who can keep their head when things go bad. That's valuable. He stood, stretched his back. Think about it. Offers open as long as you need. Dutch headed back to his men, leaving Lena and Caleb alone on the porch. The sun was almost down now, the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. He's right, you know, Caleb said quietly. You've got options now, real ones. What about you? What are your options? Caleb shrugged his good shoulder. Same as always. Head back to my valley, fix up the cabin, live quiet. Sounds lonely. It is. But lonely's familiar. Familiar's safe. Lena turned to look at him, this man who'd caught her when she fell, who'd stood against an army for a woman he barely knew, who'd bled for the simple principle that people shouldn't be property. What if you didn't have to be lonely? She asked. Caleb met her eyes, and something passed between them, a question and an answer, and a promise, all wrapped together. What are you saying? He asked. I'm saying maybe I don't want to go to Ordell or work for Dutch, or run off somewhere new. Maybe what I want is right here. Lena took a breath, gathering courage. Maybe I want to help you fix that cabin, plant a garden, build something that's ours instead of someone else's. Lena, you don't owe me anything. You don't have to eat. This isn't about owing. This is about choosing. She reached out, took his hand. For the first time in my life, I get to choose. And I choose this. I choose you. If you'll have me. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his rough hand warm in hers. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I'd like that. I'd like that a lot. They sat there as full darkness fell, two damaged people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and somehow made something good from it. The ranch was ruined, Marcus was defeated but not destroyed, and the future was uncertain at best. But in that moment, none of it mattered. They were alive, they were free, and they were together. That was enough. The weeks that followed were hard work. Caleb's cabin needed repairs after being abandoned during the siege. They patched bullet holes, replaced broken shutters, reinforced weak points. Lena learned carpentry and basic smithing, her hands growing calloused and strong. Dutch visited regularly, bringing supplies and news. The investigation into Marcus Trent was proceeding slowly but steadily. More women had come forward, each one adding weight to the accusations. Marcus himself had retreated to his ranch and rarely ventured to town anymore. Word is he's selling off assets, Dutch reported one afternoon while helping Caleb repair the roof. Liquidating property, settling debts, some say he's planning to leave the territory entirely. Good riddance, Lena said from the ground, where she was mixing mortar. Maybe, but men like that, they don't just disappear. They go somewhere else and start over. New town, new name, same old habits. Dutch hammered a nail with unnecessary force. Still, that's not your problem anymore. Let some other town deal with Marcus Trent. As autumn crept toward winter, Lena felt something shift inside her. The nightmares came less frequently. Her shoulder healed completely, leaving only a puckered scar she wore like a badge. The constant vigilance that had defined her life at the Triple T began to ease, replaced by something that felt almost like peace. She and Caleb fell into routines, morning chores, afternoon projects, evenings spent by the fire talking about everything and nothing. They were both damaged in ways that would probably never fully heal, but they were learning to be damaged together, which somehow made it bearable. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Caleb said, "I've been thinking." "Dangerous habit," he smiled. "This valley, this cabin, it's a good place, but it's also isolated. Maybe too isolated. You thinking of moving? I'm thinking we could expand, clear some land, build a proper house. Maybe raise cattle, grow crops, make this into something real instead of just a hiding place." Lena considered that. A ranch. A small one, nothing fancy, but yeah, something we build together, something that's ours. "I like that idea." She paused. "But we'd need help. Can't run a ranch with just two people." "I know. Been thinking about that too." Caleb leaned back against the porch post. "Dutch mentioned there are people, folks who've been pushed out by men like Trent, who need work and a fresh start. We could offer that. Build something different from what Trent had. A place where people are partners, not property." It was an ambitious dream, maybe even foolish, but Lena found herself warming to it. A chance to create something good from all the bad they'd been through. A chance to give others the opportunity they'd fought so hard to claim. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." They spent the winter planning. Caleb drew up designs for a larger house, a proper barn, fencing for livestock. Lena went through their finances, calculating what they could afford and what they'd need to borrow. Dutch helped spread the word about job opportunities, and by early spring, they had 3 families ready to sign on. The work was backbreaking. They cleared land, dug foundations, raised walls. Caleb's arm had healed well, but the old wound still gave him trouble in cold weather. Lena's shoulder was the same. They were a pair of broken tools trying to build something whole, and some days it felt impossible. But slowly, impossibly, it came together. The main house went up first, 2 stories of solid timber with a wide porch and real glass windows. Then the barn, built from the ground up to be sturdy enough to last generations. Fencing went in, corrals were built. A bunkhouse for the hired hands took shape. By summer, they had the bones of a working ranch. The families they'd hired moved into the bunkhouse and immediately made it home. There was the Johnsons, a couple in their 40s with 3 children and a lifetime of farming experience. The Chengs, who'd immigrated from China and knew more about irrigation than anyone Lena had ever met. And Maria Delgado, a widow with 2 teenage sons who could break horses like they were born to it. They weren't just employees, they were partners in building something new. Caleb made sure everyone understood that from the start. Profits would be shared, decisions would be made collectively, and no one owned anyone else. "It's not about charity," he explained at their first group meeting. It's about all of us having a stake in making this work. We succeed together or we fail together. No exceptions. The first year was rough. Cattle got sick, crops failed, equipment broke at the worst possible times. There were arguments about priorities and methods, tensions that came from desperate people trying to trust each other. More than once, Lena wondered if they'd bitten off more than they could chew. But they persevered. The second year was better, the third year better still. Slowly, the ranch transformed from a dream into a reality. They registered the property officially, naming it the Cross Ridge Ranch. The name felt right, a joining of two broken things into something stronger. Marcus Trent did eventually leave the territory, selling the Triple T for a fraction of its worth and disappearing into the vastness of the West. Rumor had it he'd gone to California, where no one knew his name and he could start fresh. Lena hoped he'd learned something from his fall, but she doubted it. Men like Marcus didn't change. They just found new victims. The investigation had resulted in charges, but Marcus had fled before trial. There was a warrant out for his arrest, but everyone knew it would never be served. Justice had been served in other ways, through his public humiliation, through the loss of everything he'd built, through the knowledge that he'd been beaten by people he'd considered beneath him. Lena told herself that was enough. Most days, she even believed it. 5 years after that first gunshot in Ordell, Lena stood on the porch of the main house and surveyed what they'd built. The ranch was thriving. Cattle dotted the hillsides, fields grew golden with wheat, children played in the yard while their parents worked. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was theirs, built with blood and sweat and a refusal to be broken. Caleb came out to join her, moving slower than he used to, but still solid and dependable. Gray was creeping into his hair now, and the scars they both carried were permanent fixtures. But his eyes were still that same storm cloud gray, and when he looked at her, she still saw the man who'd caught her when she fell. "Thinking about the past?" he asked. "Thinking about the future, actually." Lena took his hand, placed it on her stomach where a small but unmistakable swell was forming. "Thinking we're going to need to build a nursery." Caleb's eyes went wide. "You're about 3 months along. Doctor confirmed it yesterday when I went to town." He pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly, and Lena felt him shaking. When she looked up, there were tears on his weathered face. I never imagined." He couldn't seem to finish a sentence. "I know, me neither." Lena wiped his tears with her thumb. "But here we are anyway, building a future whether we planned it or not." "Are you scared?" "Terrified. But I've been scared before and survived it. We both have." She leaned into his embrace. "Besides, this child won't be born into captivity or violence. They'll be born free, on land we fought for, surrounded by people who chose to be here. That's something worth being scared for." Caleb kissed the top of her head. "We'll build that nursery, and a swing set, and maybe expand the schoolhouse so there's room for more children when they come. Getting ambitious in your old age. Getting hopeful. There's a difference." They stood together as the sun set over their land, over the life they'd carved from violence and pain. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A baby to prepare for, a ranch to run, the endless work of building something that mattered. But tonight, they had this moment, this peace, this hard-won joy that no one could take from them. Marcus Trent had tried to own Lena Cross. He tried to break her, to reduce her to property, to make her believe she was nothing without him. But standing here now, free, loved, carrying new life inside her, she knew the truth. She had never been his. She had always belonged to herself. And that made all the difference in the world. The nursery took shape over the following months, built into the northeast corner of the main house where morning light would stream through the windows. Caleb insisted on doing most of the work himself, despite his healing arm and Lena's protests that he was being ridiculous. "I can hire someone," she argued, watching him sand down rough edges on a cradle he'd been building for weeks. "I know you can, but this is something I want to do." He ran his hand over the wood, checking for splinters. "This child, our child, deserves something made with care, not just money." Lena understood that impulse, even if it frustrated her. They'd both spent so much of their lives having things done to them, decided for them, that choosing to create something with their own hands felt important, necessary, even. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Lena had morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, her body aching in new and unexpected ways. Some days she couldn't keep food down. Other days she was ravenous, eating enough for 3 people and still feeling hollow. The ranch work didn't stop just because she was carrying a child, and she pushed herself harder than she probably should have. Maria Delgado was the one who finally put a stop to it. She found Lena trying to mend fence posts in the south pasture and physically removed the tools from her hands. "You're done," Maria said flatly. "Go inside, put your feet up, and stop being stubborn." "I'm fine. I can work." "I'm sure you can. Doesn't mean you should." Maria's expression softened. "I've had 2 children, Lena. I know what you're feeling, like if you slow down, if you admit you need help, it means you're weak. But that's garbage. Being pregnant is hard enough without adding foolish pride to it." Lena wanted to argue, but Maria's words hit too close to home. She had been pushing herself to prove something, though she wasn't entirely sure what. That she was still strong? That she hadn't gone soft? That she could handle anything life threw at her? "I don't know how to just sit still," Lena admitted. "Then learn. Because that baby doesn't care how tough you are. It just needs you healthy." Maria took her arm, guiding her back toward the house. "Besides, there are plenty of things you can do sitting down. Books need balancing, supplies need ordering, and I've been meaning to ask your advice on expanding the irrigation system." So Lena learned to delegate, to trust others with tasks she'd normally handle herself. It was harder than she'd expected, watching other people do things differently than she would have. But the ranch kept running, sometimes even better without her micromanaging every detail. The Chengs proved invaluable with the irrigation expansion, designing a system that would water twice the acreage with half the effort. The Johnson children took over the chicken coop and vegetable garden, turning both into thriving operations that produced more than the ranch could consume. They started selling eggs and produce in Ordell, establishing the Cross Ridge name as synonymous with quality. Even Dutch got involved, stopping by once a week with his wagon full of supplies and his head full of advice. He appointed himself unofficial grandfather to the unborn child, bringing tiny clothes and hand-carved toys that he'd clearly spent hours making. "You know, I never had children of my own," he admitted one afternoon while teaching Lena how to knit booties. "Always meant to, but life kept getting in the way. Then my wife died, and I figured my chance had passed." "You've got a whole community that sees you as family," Lena said, fumbling with the needles. "That counts for something." "It does. But watching you and Ridge build this life, watching you prepare for this baby, it makes me think maybe I can still be part of something like that, even if it's not my blood." Lena set down her knitting and took Dutch's weathered hand. "You're already part of it. You saved my life, Dutch, twice. Once at the trading post and once at that ranch. This baby wouldn't exist without you." Dutch's eyes got suspiciously bright. He cleared his throat roughly and went back to his own knitting, but Lena saw the small smile on his face. Winter came early that year, bringing snow that blanketed the valley in white silence. The ranch slowed its pace, but never stopped. Cattle needed feeding, paths needed clearing, fires needed tending. Lena grew larger and more uncomfortable, her body transforming in ways that felt both miraculous and alien. Caleb was attentive to the point of being overbearing. He insisted she stay inside when the temperature dropped below freezing, monitored what she ate, and generally treated her like she was made of glass. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Lena snapped one evening when he tried to stop her from climbing the stairs to their bedroom. "I know, Caleb ran a hand through his graying hair. "I don't want anything to happen to you, to either of you." The fear in his voice cut through Lena's irritation. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "I'm scared too," she said. "Every day I wake up terrified something will go wrong. But we can't live in fear, Caleb. We've spent too much of our lives doing that already." "I know, you're right. I love you. Both of you. And the thought of losing that..." "You won't. We're tougher than we look." Lena kissed him gently. "Now let me climb these stairs before I fall asleep standing up." The baby came in early March, arriving during a late-season snowstorm that trapped the midwife in town and turned the birth into an all-hands situation. Maria took charge with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this before, while Caleb paced the hallway wearing a path in the floorboards. The labor was long and brutal. Lena had thought she understood pain after being shot, after the fights and the hardship. But this was different. This was her body tearing itself apart to create new life, and there was nothing to do but endure it. "You're doing great," Maria said, wiping Lena's sweat-soaked face. "Just a little longer." I can't. Yes, you can. You're the woman who stared down Marcus Trent and lived. You can do this. And somehow she did. As dawn broke over the snow-covered valley, a baby's cry split the air, strong and angry and absolutely perfect. It's a girl, Maria announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Lena's chest. A healthy, angry girl. Lena looked down at her daughter, at the tiny fists and scrunched-up face, an impossible amount of dark hair, and felt something shift in her soul. This was her child. Not Marcus's, not anyone else's. Hers and Caleb's, created from love instead of ownership. Caleb was allowed in a few minutes later, and the sight of him seeing his daughter for the first time was something Lena would carry forever. He approached the bed like he was walking on sacred ground, his eyes wide with wonder and terror. "Can I?" he started. "Of course." Lena carefully transferred the baby to his arms, showing him how to support the head. Caleb stood there holding his daughter, tears streaming down his face, and Lena watched this hard man who'd killed to protect her turn into something soft and vulnerable. "She's so small," he whispered. "She won't stay that way long. What should we name her?" They'd discussed names for months without deciding on anything, but looking at her now, Lena knew. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." Caleb looked at her, understanding immediately why that name mattered. Hope for a better future. Hope that the cycle of violence could be broken. Hope that this child would grow up free in ways they'd had to fight for. "Hope Ridge," Caleb said, testing how it sounded. "Yeah, that's perfect." The first year of Hope's life was chaos. She was a demanding baby, crying for hours without obvious cause, sleeping in short bursts that left both parents exhausted and stumbling through their days. The ranch work continued despite their sleep deprivation, and there were days when Lena wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake. But there were also moments of pure joy. Hope's first smile, the way she laughed when Caleb made ridiculous faces, the absolute trust in her eyes when Lena held her. These moments made the hardship worthwhile. The ranch community rallied around the new family. Maria's sons built a play yard near the main house so Hope could be outside safely. Mrs. Johnson taught Lena how to make baby food from their garden vegetables. Mr. Chung carved a mobile of horses and cattle that hung over Hope's crib, turning slowly in the breeze from the window. Dutch visited more frequently, always with some new toy or piece of advice. He held Hope with the careful tenderness of someone who understood how fragile life could be, singing old frontier songs in his gravelly voice until she fell asleep. "She's got your stubbornness," he told Lena one afternoon while Hope screamed her displeasure at being put down for a nap. "And Caleb's sense of timing," Lena replied, rubbing her temples, "always makes her needs known at the worst possible moment. That's babies for you. They're training you for the teenage years." "Don't remind me." But Dutch was grinning, and despite her exhaustion, Lena found herself grinning back. This was her life now, chaotic and messy and absolutely nothing like what she'd imagined during those years at the Triple T. It was better. Harder, but better. Hope's second birthday brought news that Marcus Trent had died in California. A saloon fight, according to the report. Someone had called him out for cheating at cards, and Marcus had gone for his gun. He'd been slower than he used to be, and the other man had been faster. He'd died in the street, bleeding out in the dust while strangers stepped over him. Dutch brought the news himself, his expression carefully neutral as he handed Lena the newspaper clipping. "Thought you should know," he said. Lena read the article twice, waiting to feel something. Relief, maybe. Or satisfaction. Or closure. But all she felt was a distant kind of sadness for the waste of it all. "He never changed," she said quietly. "Men like that rarely do. They just find new places to be terrible." Dutch watched her face. "How do you feel about it?" "I don't know. Empty, I guess. He spent so much of my life being this monster in my head, and now he's just gone. Like he never really mattered at all. Maybe that's the best revenge, living well enough that his death doesn't even register as important." Lena thought about that while watching Hope play in the yard with the Johnson children. Her daughter was laughing, chasing a ball with the single-minded determination that characterized everything she did. She had no idea about Marcus Trent, about the Triple T, about any of the darkness that had shaped her mother's past. And that was exactly how it should be. "He doesn't get to matter anymore," Lena decided. "He's dead and we're alive, and that's the end of it." "Good." Dutch squeezed her shoulder. Now go play with your daughter before she figures out how to climb the fence." Hope was indeed eyeing the fence with intent. Lena scooped her up before she could attempt it, earning a shriek of protest that turned into giggles when Lena spun her around. "Mama, down," Hope demanded. "Not until you promise to stay away from that fence." "No promise. Down!" Lena laughed and set her daughter down, watching her immediately run back to the other children. Hope was fierce and willful and absolutely fearless, qualities that terrified Lena even as she recognized them in herself. Caleb joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "You heard about Trent?" "Yeah, Dutch told me." "And?" "And nothing. He's dead. We're not. That's all that matters." Caleb nodded, seemingly satisfied with that answer. They stood together watching their daughter play, two survivors who'd built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and small victories. The ranch expanded, adding more families who needed fresh starts. They built a proper schoolhouse and hired a teacher from back east. The community grew into something that resembled a small town, with its own identity and culture. Hope grew into a girl who asked too many questions and took too many risks. She learned to ride before she could write her full name, and by age 6 she was helping with the cattle like she'd been born to it. She had Lena's dark hair and stubborn chin, Caleb's gray eyes and quiet intensity. She also had a sense of justice that sometimes got her in trouble. When a new family joined the ranch and their daughter was teased by the other children for being different, Hope bloodied the nose of the worst offender. She got in trouble for fighting, but Caleb's lecture was half-hearted at best. "You can't just hit people because they're being mean," he told her, trying to sound stern. "Why not? You hit people when they were being mean to Mama." Lena had to leave the room to keep from laughing. Caleb found her later, shaking his head. "She's got a point," he admitted. "She does, but we can't exactly encourage her to solve every problem with her fists." "No, but we can teach her to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. That seems important." They tried to teach Hope about the past in age-appropriate ways, about how Mama and Papa had met, about why the ranch was important, about choosing to build something good instead of just running from something bad. Hope listened with the intensity she brought to everything, filing away information for later use. When Hope was 8, a man came to the ranch looking for work. He was younger than most of their hired hands, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and hands that shook when he thought no one was watching. Caleb interviewed him while Lena stood nearby, and something about the man's story didn't quite add up. After he left to think about the offer, Lena voiced her concerns. "He's running from something," she said. "Most people who come here are." "I know, but..." Lena couldn't articulate what bothered her, just a feeling. "Maybe we should look into him more before we offer him a place." Caleb considered that. "I'll write to some contacts, see what I can find out. But Lena, we can't turn away everyone who makes us nervous. Sometimes people just need a chance. And sometimes they're dangerous." "True, but we were dangerous once too. You shot a man. I killed several. Who were we to deserve a second chance?" The question hung between them. Lena thought about the girl she'd been, desperate, angry, capable of violence when pushed. If someone had judged her only by her worst moments, she'd never have made it here. "All right," she said, "but we watch him closely. First sign of trouble. First sign of trouble, he's gone. I promise." The young man, his name was Thomas, proved to be a hard worker but deeply troubled. He had nightmares that woke the bunkhouse, and he flinched at loud noises. Over time, pieces of his story emerged. He'd been a soldier in a border conflict, seen things no person should see, done things he couldn't undo. He was looking for peace, for a way to live with what he'd become. Caleb took him under his wing in a way that surprised Lena. He worked alongside Thomas, teaching him ranch skills, but also just listening when the younger man needed to talk. Slowly, Thomas began to settle. The nightmares came less frequently. The shaking stopped. "Why him?" Lena asked Caleb one night. "You never got that involved with the other hands." "Because I see myself in him. That could have been me if someone hadn't given me a chance to be more than my worst mistakes." Caleb turned to look at her. "You gave me that chance, whether you meant to or not. Seemed right to pass it along." Lena understood then. The ranch wasn't just about building a life for themselves. It was about creating a place where broken people could heal, where the past didn't have to define the future. It was the opposite of everything Marcus Trent had built. A community instead of a kingdom, partnership instead of ownership. Hope turned 10 and started asking harder questions. Why did Mama have a scar on her back? Why did some people in town look at them strangely? Why did Papa sometimes wake up shouting in the night? Lena and Caleb decided she was old enough for truth, or at least a version of it. They sat her down one evening and told her the story, edited for a child's ears but honest in its essentials. They told her about the Triple T, about Marcus Trent, about the fight for freedom. Hope listened with wide eyes, processing information that seemed too big for her small frame. When they finished, she was quiet for a long time. "The bad man is dead now?" she finally asked. "Yes," Lena confirmed. "Good." Hope paused. "But you were scared, even though you fought back?" "Terrified. But being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right even when you're scared." Hope nodded, filing that away. "If someone tried to take me, would you fight for me like Papa fought for you?" "With everything I have," Lena promised. "But it won't come to that. You're safe here. Because you made it safe. Because we all made it safe together, me and Papa and Dutch and everyone on this ranch. Safety isn't something one person can create alone." That seemed to satisfy Hope. She went back to playing, but Lena noticed she paid more attention to the world around her after that conversation. Started noticing when people were kind or cruel, when power was used or abused. She was learning to see the structures that shaped people's lives, and Lena hoped that awareness would serve her well. The ranch continued to grow. By the time Hope was 12, they had 30 families living on the property, each one contributing to the community in their own way. They'd built a church for those who wanted it, though Lena and Caleb rarely attended. Their faith had been tested too many times to sit comfortably in pews. They'd also built a library filled with books donated from back east. Hope spent hours there, devouring everything she could find. She had a hunger for knowledge that reminded Lena of herself at that age, before Marcus had tried to starve it out of her. "She's going to leave someday," Caleb said one evening, watching Hope through the window as she read by lamplight in the library. "I know. You okay with that?" Lena thought about it. The idea of Hope leaving terrified her. The world was still dangerous, still full of people like Marcus Trent, but keeping her here out of fear would just be another kind of cage. "I'll have to be," she said. "We can't protect her from everything. Best we can do is teach her how to protect herself." "She's already good at that. Too good sometimes," Lena laughed. "She gets that from you. She gets that from both of us. We're equally stubborn." "True enough." They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned to read each other's moods without words. The ranch spread out before them, fields and cattle and buildings, but more importantly, people. A whole community they'd built from nothing but determination and hope. Hope turned 15 and announced she wanted to go to school in Denver. A real school, she specified, one that would prepare her for college. Lena's first instinct was to say no, to keep her daughter close where she could be protected, but Caleb squeezed her hand in warning. "Tell us more about this school," he said. Hope laid out her research. She'd been planning this for months, writing letters and gathering information. The school had a good reputation, taught practical skills alongside academic subjects, and would prepare her for university if she chose to go. "I want to learn things," Hope said, her voice passionate. "I want to understand how the world works, how to make it better. I can't do that just staying here." Lena heard echoes of her younger self in those words, the hunger for something more, the refusal to accept limitations. It hurt to hear it even as she felt proud. "It's expensive," she pointed out, grasping for practical objections since emotional ones wouldn't work. "I know. I've been saving money from selling my carvings in town, and I thought maybe the ranch could sponsor me. I'd come back and use what I learned to help improve operations." She'd thought of everything. Lena looked at Caleb, who was trying very hard not to smile. "Let us think about it," Caleb said. "This is a big decision." Hope nodded and left them alone. As soon as she was gone, Lena slumped into a chair. "She's leaving." "Not yet, and not forever, just going to school." What if something happens to her? What if she meets someone like Marcus? What if she lives her life and makes her own choices and becomes her own person? Caleb knelt beside Lena's chair. "We can't keep her in a bubble. That wouldn't be protecting her. It'd be imprisoning her, and we both know what that feels like." He was right. Lena knew he was right, but knowing didn't make it easier. "When did she grow up?" Lena asked quietly. While we weren't looking, same as everyone's kids. Caleb took her hands. But we raised her right. She's smart and strong, and she knows her own worth. That's the best protection we could ever give her. They let Hope go to Denver, though Lena cried for 2 days after dropping her off. The ranch felt emptier without Hope's energy filling it, without her constant questions and fierce opinions. But life continued. The cattle needed tending, the crops needed harvesting, the community needed leadership. Hope wrote letters every week, filled with excitement about her classes and new friends. She was thriving in ways the ranch could never have allowed, growing into a woman who understood both hard work and academic pursuit. When she came home for summers, she brought new ideas for the ranch, better breeding techniques, modern irrigation methods, crop rotation strategies that could increase their yields. "You've been busy," Caleb said, reviewing her notes. "I told you I'd use what I learned to help." Hope's smile was bright. "The ranch gave me so much. I want to give back." She graduated at 17, top of her class, with multiple university offers. She chose a school in California that specialized in agricultural science, determined to bring modern farming techniques back to the ranch. Lena and Caleb made the long journey to attend her graduation. Sitting in the audience watching their daughter accept her diploma, Lena felt something settle in her chest. This was what they'd fought for. This moment, the freedom for their daughter to choose her own path, to reach for dreams without anyone trying to clip her wings. Marcus Trent had wanted to own people. They'd built a community that helped people own themselves. Hope came back to the ranch after university, but not as a child returning home. She came back as a partner, ready to implement everything she'd learned. The ranch transformed under her guidance. More efficient, more productive, more sustainable. She also brought new ideas about worker treatment and profit sharing that pushed even Caleb's progressive instincts. "You want to give the hands equal ownership?" he asked, reviewing her proposal. "Not equal, proportional to their contribution. But yes, actual ownership stakes instead of just profit sharing. People work harder when they're building something that's truly theirs." "Your mother and I started this ranch. Giving away ownership isn't giving it away. It's sharing what was never just yours to begin with." Hope's expression was gentle but firm. "Every family here helped build this place. Their sweat and blood is in every fence post and building. Shouldn't that count for something more than a paycheck?" Caleb looked at Lena, who'd been quiet during this exchange. "She's right," Lena said. "We built this place to be different from what Marcus had. Maybe it's time to fully commit to that." It took a year to work out the details, but eventually they restructured the ranch as a cooperative. Every family that had been there more than 2 years received ownership shares based on their tenure and contribution. Major decisions were voted on collectively. Profits were distributed fairly instead of hoarded at the top. Some of the old-timers grumbled about change, but most embraced it. The ranch became theirs in a way it never had been before, and productivity increased as a result. People took better care of what they owned. Hope was 25 when she met Daniel Chen, grandson of the original Chengs who'd helped establish the ranch's irrigation system. He was an engineer working on railroad expansion through the territory, but he fell in love with both Hope and the ranch. They married in a ceremony that brought together everyone from the community, a celebration that lasted 2 days and left everyone exhausted and happy. Lena watched her daughter dance with her new husband and felt the circle completing itself. Hope had everything Lena had fought for: choice, love, freedom, safety. The cycle had been broken. The chain that bound women to men like Marcus Trent had been shattered. Caleb found her standing alone, watching the celebration. "You're crying," he observed. "Happy tears. I didn't think I'd live to see this." "See what?" "Hope. Dancing with someone she chose, someone who sees her as an equal, building a life on her own terms." Lena wiped her eyes. "When I was her age, I was property. I couldn't imagine a future where I'd be anything else. And now here's our daughter, free in ways I couldn't even dream of." Caleb pulled her close. "You made that possible." "We made it possible, together." Lena leaned into his embrace. "Thank you for catching me when I fell. Thank you for giving me something worth standing for." They stood together as the party continued around them, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful from it. They were older now. Lena was 45, Caleb pushing 55. Gray hair and old scars, bodies that ached in the morning and moved slower than they used to. But they were alive. They were free. and they'd built a legacy that would outlast them both. 10 years later, Lena stood in that same spot watching Hope and Daniel's daughter, her granddaughter Grace, play in the yard. Grace was 5 years old, fearless and bright, already showing signs of the stubborn independence that ran in the family. Caleb had passed the previous winter, his heart finally giving out after years of hard use. He died in their bed with Lena holding his hand, his last words a whispered "thank you" that encompassed everything they'd been to each other. Lena missed him every day, but she also knew he'd lived a full life, a good life, a life that mattered. He'd died free and loved, surrounded by community he'd helped build. That was more than most people got. She was 60 now, her body showing every year she'd lived. Her shoulder still ached in cold weather, a permanent reminder of the bullet that had started everything. But she could still ride, still work, still contribute to the ranch that had become her life's work. Hope came to stand beside her, following her gaze to where Grace was attempting to climb a tree. "She reminds me of you at that age," Lena said. "Stubborn and reckless, determined and fearless. There's a difference." Hope smiled. "Are you sure you don't want to move into town? The winters are hard out here, and you're not getting any younger." "I'm staying right here. This ranch is my home. I'm not leaving it until they carry me out." "Stubborn, determined. There's a difference." Lena echoed Hope's earlier words, making her daughter laugh. They watched Grace together in comfortable silence. The ranch continued around them, cattle lowing in the distance, people going about their work, the rhythms of life that had become as familiar as breathing. "Do you ever regret it?" Hope asked suddenly. "Everything you went through to get here?" Lena thought about that question honestly. Did she regret the pain, the fear, the violence? Did she regret being shot, hunted, forced to kill to survive? "No," she said finally, "because all of it led me here. To this ranch, to your father, to you and Grace, and this whole community. The path was hard, but the destination was worth it. Even losing Papa? Even that. Because I had 40 years with a man who saw me as an equal, who fought beside me instead of controlling me. Do you know how rare that is? How precious?" Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I'd rather have 40 years of real love than 100 years of comfortable slavery." Hope took her hand, squeezed gently. "He'd be proud of what we've built. He'd be proud of what you've built. I'm just still here. You're not just anything, Mama. You're the foundation all of this rests on." Lena looked around the ranch, at the buildings and fields, the people and animals, the whole thriving community that had grown from two desperate people refusing to give up. She thought about Marcus Trent rotting in a California grave, his empire scattered and forgotten. She thought about all the women who disappeared into his darkness and never escaped. She thought about the fact that she had escaped, that she'd not only survived but built something that would outlast everyone who'd tried to destroy her. "Maybe I am," she admitted. "Maybe that's enough." Grace ran up to them, dirt on her face and triumph in her eyes. "Grandma, I climbed to the top. Did you see?" "I saw. You were very brave." Papa Caleb always said being brave means doing things even when you're scared. Was I scared? I don't think I was scared. Lena knelt down despite her aching knees, looking her granddaughter in the eyes. Being brave doesn't always mean being scared. Sometimes it just means trying something new, something hard, something no one's done before. You climbed that tree when no one told you to, when no one made you. That's brave. Grace considered this seriously. "Will you teach me more brave things?" "Every day. But first, let's get you cleaned up before your mother sees how dirty you are." Grace took her hand, chattering about trees and birds and all the wonders she'd seen from the top. Lena listened with half her attention, while the other half marveled at the miracle of this moment, that she could stand here, free and whole, teaching her granddaughter about courage and choice. That night, sitting alone on her porch as the sun set over the valley, Lena allowed herself to fully remember everything. Marcus Trent's face, Samuel's bullet, the terror of being hunted, the desperate fight for survival, the men she'd killed, the blood and fear, and endless, grinding struggle. She also remembered Caleb catching her as she fell, his steady hand stitching her wound, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered, building the cabin, fortifying the ranch, standing together against impossible odds. Hope's birth, her first steps, her graduation, her wedding, Grace's arrival. All of it connected, The pain and the joy, the loss and the gain, the violence and the peace. You couldn't have one without the other. The hard parts had shaped her into someone strong enough to build something good. Marcus Trent had tried to own her, to break her, to reduce her to nothing. But in his failure, he'd inadvertently created his opposite, a woman who would spend her life ensuring no one else suffered what she had. A woman who would build community instead of kingdoms, partnership instead of property, freedom instead of chains. In the end, that was the best revenge. Not his death in some California street, but her life. This thriving, messy, beautiful life that proved people could be more than their worst moments. That broken things could be mended. That chains could be broken. Lena Cross had been shot in the back while running from a man who believed he owned her, but she'd been caught by someone who believed she deserved freedom. And from that moment, from that single instant when Caleb Ridge chose to help instead of turn away, everything had changed. The ranch spread out before her in the fading light, solid and real and utterly hers. Not because she owned it in the way Marcus had owned the Triple T, but because she'd built it with her own hands, her own sweat, her own stubborn refusal to be anything less than free. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always new challenges. But tonight, Lena Cross sat on her porch in the valley she'd fought for, surrounded by the community she'd helped build, thinking about the granddaughter who would never know what it meant to be property. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that every bullet, every scar, every moment of terror had been worth it. Because she was free. And that made all the difference.